to the Crooked Table podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanez Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table podcast. This is Rob, and we have reached the end of 2020 for the Crooked Table podcast, as well as the end of our conversation with Jackson Smith on The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. So if you're just joining us, the first half of this conversation, which mostly covered either The Matrix sequels generally, the franchise itself, and The Matrix Reloaded, is up now as a separate episode. So we're going to rejoin the conversation already in progress, starting when we shifted exclusively, essentially, over to The Matrix Revolutions. So before we join the conversation already in progress, here's a little bit of the trailer for The Matrix Revolutions right now.
The program Smith has grown beyond your control. You cannot stop him, but I can.
And if you fail,
I won't.
Do you know what happened to Neo?
He is trapped in a place between this world and the machine world.
Bring me the eyes of the Oracle, and I will give you back your savior.
Mr. Anderson,
Who are you? Look past the flesh and see your enemy. It's impossible. Not impossible. Inevitable.
in less than 12 hours, the machines will breach the dock walls. If we have to give our lives, we give him hell before we do!
Can Zion be saved?
tonight, the future of both worlds will be in your hands or in his.
Mr. Anderson, welcome back. We missed you.
It ends tonight.
So into Revolutions, it's very much focused on the military aspect of it. Obviously, that's like, as you said earlier, so much of it is set in the real world. I think that's part of why the Reloaded feels like so much more fun in a way, just because there's more of a sense of wonder, a sense of anything can happen in Reloaded and Revolutions. It's just it feels very end of a trilogy in that it things start to feel sort of slightly repetitive, slightly like, oh, okay, this is, we have the big scene in the entrance to Club Hell with Trinity, Morpheus, and Seraph trying to get to Neo, and it's like, okay, this is like the lobby shootout from the first one, but now they're upside down. I mean, it's still fun, but it's also like we're running a little low on steam here with certain aspects of this movie. So that's one part that I don't think works as well as they wanted to. I think Colin Chow, who plays Seraph, is such a boss in that sequence and in pretty much everything, all the action stuff in these movies. Do you have anything to add on the Club Hell battle? And then I want to back it up, obviously, to the train man.
Yeah, well, I get why people didn't really like this one at the time, because it's like, what all of the coolest action sequences in this franchise have all played on what is possible within the Matrix. It's like the freeway sequence, or I forgot what you called it, but when Neo's fighting all the Agent Smiths, like it's like it's like the Matrix is this playground where you can do all these crazy action scenes, and that's not really what the third one is. So much of the action takes place in the real world, and I think it was like I can imagine being an audience member in 2003 and being just disappointed by the lack of kung fu in this movie. That being said, though, I think the attack on Zion is just one of the craziest and coolest battle sequences I've ever seen in my entire life. I think that sequence was just like astonishing. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised they were able to stage an action sequence in the real world in this franchise and make it just as compelling as one of the ones set in the Matrix, but without all of the gun fu and the jumping off walls and crazy shit. It was a great action sequence, but completely on its own terms for its own reasons. Ditto, honestly, with the final fight with Agent Smith. It's like it's This movie is really it's something interesting. my roommate Chris, who I watch these movies with, is super into fantasy. He's super into fantasy and fantasy world building and fantasy books and movies and TV series. And the third one was his favorite. He was like, yeah, this is really cool, because he was like, it feels like Return of the King. This feels like an epic fantasy final battle showdown movie. And I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of what it is. It's not like the first two movies, which were very much a blend of that, but also like sci-fi and kung fu movies. Like I feel like this third movie is very strictly like a epic fantasy battle movie. That's just what it is. It's like a Lord of the Rings movie. It honestly felt most like watching Return of the King or Two Towers. The Zion battle sequence definitely has big Helm's Deep vibes. And it works. I think that was there was no point in this third movie where I was like, oh, that was the wrong way to take it. That was a bad call. That was a bad way to explain this or wrap things up. Like everything, all the chips felt like they landed exactly in the places that they needed to. It just didn't necessarily look like the first two movies. So yeah, I get why the reception to it was a little bit more lukewarm, but I still think it's great. I still think it's a really great movie. I think it's truly excellent.
I'm also realizing now, as we're talking about this, how much conceptually the Matrix trilogy shares with like the Back to the Future trilogy, in that the first film sets up this new idea. We're going to go back in time. You're going to see your parents, or, the real world, that what you think is the real world is a computer program. Then the second one is like complete ape shit, back and forth, split timelines, aliens, ghosts, all kinds of weird, crazy shit. And the architect, whatever. And then the third one, they're like, all right, no, we need to pick a lane, settle down, get comfy in there, and just let things play out, whether it's, a Western or sort of essentially a kind of post-apocalyptic war movie, which is where the Matrix Revolutions mostly sits, except for the beginning and the ending. So I think that's an interesting way to look at movies
again. Yeah, I gotta watch the Back to the Future movies again now. It's been a while since I've seen them. But yeah, I mean, like, look, good storytelling is good storytelling, and it's like I think the reason I kept drawing comparisons in my head to shit like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings as I was watching this trilogy was because I think any kind of story told in that format and in that time and with that scope shares similarities in terms of the ebbs and flows of how things go and where the chips fall. It's like there's an intuitiveness to a good trilogy that I think The Matrix really taps into that other trilogies the sequels didn't necessarily ultimately, but almost got there. But yeah, no. So I definitely dig this one, but it is definitely like, okay, we've wound everything up. Let's just watch it all play out. Let's watch it all go where it needs to,
Right. And it's supposed to be the big payoff for so many of those supporting characters we get tossed at us in the first like half hour of Reloaded. And I think it kind of works in that regard. But I want to back it up a little. So Neo has basically a literal sort of out of body experience where his mind is stuck in between the Matrix and the real world, or stuck in the train station, the Mobile Avenue, with the train man character actor Bruce Spence who was in actually Revenge of the Sith briefly on what was the name of that planet? Utapau. He was the tall dude with you'll know him if you see him.
Yeah, no, well, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't he he's in the Mad Max movies too, isn't he?
He's in, I think, Road Warrior maybe, and he's also in the extended edition.
The pilot in Road Warrior.
In the extended edition of Return of the King, the Mouth of Sauron, in that, exactly. So he's all over all of these different properties. Yeah, but he's
got such a cool presence. Like, he
does. He really does. He's also in 2003. He did a voice in Finding Nemo, so he was strangely one of the highest grossing actors, like as far as the performance, the box office performance of his releases that year. But yes,
that's crazy.
It is crazy. I do love that whole sequence though in the train man, the train station there with Sati and Ramachandra. Like it just weirdly hits me in a very emotional way. The where Neo is learning for the first time. He's never heard programs talk about love, and Ramakandra saying, "I love my daughter very much," and I'm like, "Fuck, this works." Like, I don't know why this works, but this scene works so well. The importance is they love the importance is the connection the word implies. It's a real, coming from the Wachowskis. It's a real. It feels like a message really ahead of its time in a way too, coming from them specifically. It feels like a real inclusive sentiment back in a time when they weren't able to tackle issues of gender and identity and things like that in the same way that they can now. In that LGBT community, the LGBT community wasn't as accepted in mainstream pop culture. Like, that they would have put a lot more of that kind of stuff, that kind of content in these movies and tackled them like they did in Sense8. Had the culture been up to that point. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I sort of to build on that, and this was something I don't know why I noticed it this acutely on rewatch, but these movies are so diverse, like so diverse. Like the commitment to casting like really excellent actors of color in all kinds of different roles in these movies was so ahead of its time. Like I think about like even movies nowadays don't feel as diverse as the Matrix movies do. Like diversity a lot of times in movies nowadays feels like, oh, well, we'll put a black person in there. We'll put one black person in there because we're woke, whereas it's like these movies, you don't even really notice it, but like half the cast is black. Like it's and I think it just speaks to just how like the Wachowskis are just like good people deep down, I think. And I think they have such a positive they have such a positive forward thinking outlook on life and culture that they at the time they were just like, yeah, we're gonna cast our movie with people. Like they're not gonna just not gonna just be like white ass movie stars. It's gonna be like Lawrence Fishburne and Jada Pinkett Smith and what's her name who plays the Oracle, like Gloria Foster. Like it's so incredible and was so ahead of its time. And yeah, it's like I think if they'd have gotten to make the Matrix trilogy like probably post 2010, would there have been queer characters in it? Of course there would have.
100%.
It's like they I love him so much. Yeah. But it's like, like even in that scene, even in the train sequence, just like making that like an Indian family, like I love that whole conversation too, that he has about karma. And it's like, he's like, you're a machine. How can you believe in karma? And he's like, what's the difference? We all have purpose. We all have fate. These are things that are not unique to just humans now. It's like, now that there is artificial intelligence, yeah, why can't machines fall in love? It's a whole new subset of humanity that has gotten made. And I think that's one of the things I really love about the third movie acutely is that it really goes into like, look, no, now we live in a world where the machines are also people. The machines are also people. And what happens to the people in that machine also matters. It's like Neo doesn't just save the human world by the end of the series. He saves the whole world. And I think it's like I think it's scenes like this one in the train station that really build just how important that is. That it's like even though the machines are the oppressors, like these programs are still, they're people now. You have to deal with that. You have to take that into account.
Well, and the marriage of karma / purpose, it's kind of, he defines karma as what I am here to do, again, with purpose. It's sort of the marriage of, this is your purpose. This is what you're, air quotes, destined to do, but you can choose what your purpose is. It's those two yes. elements aren't mutually exclusive. And as you were saying, this franchise up to this point has painted the machines as 100% pretty much villainous. The Merovingian, the agents, like there's been no real empathy for them until this scene where Neo's like, oh crap, there is another side to the story that we're not hearing because we're only on, we're in Zion living in our little bubble and sort of demonizing all the machines when I'm really looking forward to you watching the Animatrix, because there is a 2-part thing called the Second Renaissance, parts 1 and 2, that discusses like sort of the rise of the machines, the struggle, the early war that leads to the creation of the Matrix, all in like, I don't know, 15 minutes or something, both parts together. And it goes through a lot of this, and you sort of see how the machines were initially just wanting to be treated like as equals, wanting to be, sort of accepted, and how that sort of went awry and led to them sort of uprising against humanity and then humanity scorching the sun, like Morpheus says. There's a lot of that backstory, I think, is in there, and it takes until the third movie for the franchise to really sort of unfold the complexities in the machine side of things.
The mark of a great, I think the mark of a great story is complexity. It's never just one thing at once. It's never that simple. It's always many things. And it's like, that's what makes The Matrix such a great story, is that it's not just humans good, machines bad. It's that, this is a myth about our relationship with technology. And it's like it takes what the birth of AI might look like and frames it in a way that feels like epic and religious and mythic, but like still is still honest about like what that would look like and what that would feel like, in the context of our modern world. And it's, I love the third movie particularly. I love Revelations because it's so, it deals so much with that. It dives so headfirst into that. And even just down to making Neo a bridge between the two worlds, making him capable of seeing, I love, I'm jumping around in the movie, sorry, but like, I love that he goes blind, because it's like now his only way of seeing is through the machines. And it's like the fact that he has that is allows him to keep on fighting and keep on moving. It's excellent. I don't know why people hate this movie. I think this movie's great.
Yeah, I don't hate any of them. I think that the drop in quality between the first one and the sequels is noticeable, but I do think the sequels are like, I acknowledge them as canon. I've rewatched them several times. Like I said, I was in college when these movies came out, so I would put on the whole trilogy kind of back to back to back while I was like working on papers or whatever in the background, just because I was so wrapped up in this world, back in the day. And getting back to the Club Hell thing, we get a little more Merovingian, a little more Persephone. It feels like mostly the movie kind of reaffirming Trinity and Neo's bond about how far she's willing to go to save him again. And I do love that we get the drop of the Merovingian saying that he wants the eyes of the Oracle, and then they can only be given, which I was like, oh, so that's why the Oracle has to submit to Agent Smith later on, that kind of thing. I thought that was a nice little bit of foreshadowing, which I didn't pick up on in previous viewing.
Yeah.
And I love the reunion with Trinity and Neo in the train station, and the Don Davis score kicks in, all of that. But it does feel sort of like, the first 25 minutes is kind of unfinished business, just kind of wrapping things up and gearing up for the revolution of the title. Is there anything about
Jabba the Hutt? It's the Jabba the Hutt sequence.
100% Jabba the Hutt.
It's it's Jabba the Hutt, but with the Merovingian instead of Jabba the Hutt. Is basically what it is. Yeah. Only Merovingian doesn't die, so he'll be back. And plus, he's a program, so I don't know if I guess he could be deleted. But yeah, we love. He's. I mean, fun. Is anyone really dead in Star Wars? Is anybody really dead in Star Wars? Like, who knows? Jabba the Hutt might be alive.
I saw Jabba the Hutt get choked out. It looks pretty permanent there. He's not coming back through the Force or anything.
Jabba the Hutt, a Star Wars story.
I would watch that. Actually, wasn't it Guillermo del Toro who was like, I want to make like a Godfather, but like Jabba the Hutt style, and that would be amazing.
Did he say that?
Something like that, like years ago when they were like, who standalone movies up? I'm like, please do that. That'd be great.
If Guillermo del Toro did that, it would be good. It would be really good, but only if Guillermo del Toro did it.
Right, exactly. Then we get to the scene in Revolutions that I think everybody, including me, was really waiting for, where he goes to see the Oracle. And it's basically, we finally get a little bit. He's like, he goes there. He's like, I have these questions. Why did I do this? What is this? And me, as sitting in the audience, was like, yeah, what up with that, dude? Give us some answers. So we get sort of kind of answers. We get the power of the one extends beyond this world. The architect balances the equation. The Oracle's job is to unbalance it. And she wants to end the war. And it really just kind of keys up the epicness of Smith v. Neo, Dawn of Matrix, or whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
What are your, this is where we get the whole opposite negative, the equation trying to balance itself out. And again, gotta love that, grand scope of good and evil kind of clashing. Any thoughts on that scene, and sort of, because the Smiths are about to show up and take care of the Oracle in a second.
Oh yeah, it lends the story like a mythic quality. I feel like it stops being like Smith stops being just like a nuisance, and he starts being like an actual threat. It's like no, you don't get it. It's not that he's just like a virus that's got out of control. Like he is the yin to your yang. He is your cosmic opposite. You mentioned Harry and Voldemort earlier, and I think that's a really apt comparison. It's like only one can live, they're, one cannot live while the other survives, whatever, it's like that kind of thing where it's like you have to defeat him, or else he will literally destroy everything, and then I love that they follow up that scene with a really, really clear look at what that looks like. Honestly, I think that the scene where all of the Smiths show up and possess everybody and steal the Oracle is probably the closest that this series ever got to like outright horror, and it does it really well. It's a really, really haunting little 5 minutes of movie where you really understand just how great the stakes are and how powerful Smith has become. And you also get perhaps the most hysterical evil villain laugh in a movie ever.
Yes. Oh my God. So it's amazing. It's also for Neo, it's the scene where he's, it's the scene where the movie really lines up the fact that you have these two trains speeding towards each other and they're going to collide. Yeah. The threat of the machines digging to Zion, Smith taking over the Matrix and beyond, as we're about to learn in a few minutes. But yes, the scene with Smiths, the Smiths, not the band, the Agent Smiths, catching up with Sarah, Sati, quotes Sati with the cookies need love, like everyone does. The not such a bad guy once you get to know me, all that. Like Weaving is on fire in this scene. He like, oh God, the moment with the Oracle where he's like freaking out, like, oh, why would she stay? Why wouldn't she leave? Or he picks up the cookies and throws them, like, maybe you knew I was gonna do that. Maybe you didn't. Like he's starting to crack even more than usual. He's like, if you did, that meant you placed that there on purposefully. That whole, I love it. It's so great. And then kind of punctuating with the laugh. That's probably, as you sort of alluded to, one of the best like laughing gifts of all time that I feel like periodically over the last year or whatever, when we were talking about doing this episode, we would just drop that gif in every once in a while, just because it's like the perfect encapsulation of how much fun these movies are and how much fun Weaving is to watch. So great. He's amazing in this.
I love it too, because it's like, I think Agent Smith, it's not that he's trying to become human, but it's like he's free from, he is free from being just this like, deterrent program that just exists for one purpose. And I love that laugh so much, because it's like, it feels like he's trying. Like it feels like he's like, I'm laughing, right? That's totally what I'm doing. I'm laughing. But he's like not. It's like forced in the best possible way. It's like forced in a way that makes his character even funnier, even scarier. It's just one of the most memeable moments in all of these movies.
No, it's like halfway through that laugh, his eyes kind of like turn inward or something. Like it's just like his like eyebrows kind of arched in a different way. Like it's crazy. And of course, it works from a character standpoint too, because he's taken over the Oracle, so he sees. I know it does. I've seen it.
Everything.
He does that whole. Yeah, he's seen up to the choice that he doesn't understand. Going back to what the Oracle was just saying.
Yeah,
it's the writing is so clean and everything. Like you watch it the first couple times and you're like, I don't understand what the hell is happening. This is like really complicated and dense. But the more you watch it and the more you think about it, and the closer you pay attention to things, everything is the setup and payoff is all there. It is. It's all out on the table. It's not like the Wachowskis are pulling things out of their ass. I mean, they are as far as it's a science fiction world, and they can make up the rules as they go along. But they set things up and pay them off. It's not just, well, where did that come from? Now there's I don't know. It's great. It's really strong storytelling. I think too. Is why even the crazy moments like that really, really resonate.
I think the cohesion between these three movies is so much stronger than it is with most franchises nowadays. Even the good Star Wars movies, I feel like even the original trilogy, it's like you can tell like, oh, they brought in a different director and they wanted to take it in this direction or they wanted to add this thing. These movies are like watching these three movies back to back to back is the most gratifying thing ever. You're just like, oh wow, yeah, no, that all makes sense. It's all there. It's like like watching Lord of the Rings back to back. It is true excellence.
Yeah, and there's no time lapse between Reloaded and Revolutions. It literally picks up a couple hours later, maybe. I mean, Trinity took a nap,
right,
and nothing's changed. Yeah. It's just like, it's and I love movies that do that. I love when you can literally watch a trilogy, and then there's a few months or whatever between the first and second Matrix movies, but when you can do like Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings, these movies where you just kind of run through one to the next, and there's not those giant gaps in time. Like obviously we both love the Star Wars movies, but you watch one and then it's like 10 years later, then this happens. And I'm like, oh, okay, but what happened like in the middle? I guess I have to watch an animated series or something to pick up on what's going on. So I love that kind of continuous three-part story. And I think they really nail that here. Mm-hmm. So you were saying about Morpheus really believing in Neo over the one. And I think you see that extending also to Niobe, who volunteers her ship for him to take to the Machine City, even though Roland and everyone else is like, you're out of here. Roland is that one dude who's like very upset about everything. I feel like he says like 3 times in this movie, this person's out of their goddamn mind. So he loves to say that.
Yeah. Well, he's a realist. Yeah, well, I like that character because it's like he's the realist, right? Like he's the one that after the Battle of Zion, he's like, y'all need to calm, like y'all need to get your head straight. Like the machines will be back in like 10 minutes here while everybody else is like celebrating. He's and I think it's cool because like that means he does end up butting heads with Morpheus and everybody who are like, you have to trust Neo to do this. He's like, I don't want to trust this guy. I'm trusting, what I see in front of me. And I think what's cool about this movie is you see the benefit of that, but it's like the benefit of that paired also with the hope that Morpheus has in Neo. It's like it's a combination of that and sort of the boots on the ground, hard edged, we're gonna do what needs to be done. This is how things are that Captain Roland really brings to it, which makes it such a great war movie. I think Revelations is, if I were to classify this movie in any one genre, I think this is definitely a war movie more than anything else. It's just a futuristic sci-fi war movie, where they have mech suits and
I love the fact that I think Jada Pinkett Smith is so good in this movie too. This one specifically, she actually has things to do in this film. She gets her, again, to go back to the Star Wars thing, she gets her like Han Solo Kessel Run kind of moment, like later in the movie where she's doing crazy things with the hammer. And it's really exciting to me that she's coming back for 4 as well. It's interesting. Like, I'm really curious what we can kind of expect based on the characters that they sort of cherry picked from this trilogy to return for the next one. Cause I'm wondering how Niobe fits into all of that.
Well, I like Niobe a lot as a character, and I did feel she was like a little underused in the movies. I think she's good and it all works, but it's just like she's such a fun presence, and Jada Pinkett Smith is so wonderful. I'm very, very excited to see her come back, and I hope it's in a pretty sizable capacity, because that's a car you don't want to keep in the garage. You know, that's a character you want to use. That's a you know, that's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, I love her sort of when you know, because they set it up so beautifully. The ship has to like navigate through all these like service tunnels, and everybody's like, you can't do that, that's impossible, and she's like, I'll be fine, you know. And
I've done it.
And then you see her like actually doing it in the movie, and you're like, how is it possible for them to, like, it's like every single turn is like going up and down and around, and you're like oh my gosh, you know. She's a great character. She's wonderful. I'm definitely excited to see her come back.
We have to talk about Bane stowing away on the Logos, and Neo's face off with a very different version of Smith, who still loves to monologue. He's still like toying with Neo. He gets such pleasure of being like, "Oh, you still don't recognize me? Look behind these dull cow eyes," and he still sounds exactly the same as you were saying earlier.
I swear it was Hugo Weaving.
It does feel like Hugo Weaving did the voiceover and they laid it over, but I swear it's not. It's a really fun way to have Smith to illustrate how pervasive a threat he is. I mean, this one doesn't succeed either. It doesn't, you know, it succeeds in blinding Neo, which, as you said, is really interesting because it reveals that only way that he can connect to the world now is through the Matrix, through the code. And it also plays quite blatantly into the sort of blind messiah idea. What else about this sequence really stands out to you? I also, before we get to that, I really love the fact that even when he looks at Smith through the code, Smith's sort of Matrix visage still has on the sunglasses. That's cool.
Oh yeah, you got to have the sunglasses. That's the look.
That's his look.
That's the key to let you know. Yeah, it's again. I mean, it's like what I was saying with the ships. It's like, I think good design, whether it's costume design or production design or whatever, like good design is specificity. It's there is this little indicator that is going to tell you, oh, that's who this person is, or that's what this is. And it's like, I love that the second that you see sunglasses, immediately you're like, Agent Smith. Yes, 100%. Like, it's just it's a really strong choice and a really strong indicator. But anyway, to answer your question, I think what I love so much about that scene is that it is a fight scene between all these characters who have been fighting in the Matrix in the real world, which was pretty funny, because it's like, you know, when obviously, like, when Trinity and Neo are fighting Agent Smith in the Matrix, it's like all this beautiful, elegantly choreographed kung fu and just like bullet mesmerizing time. And then you get into and bullet time and everything, and then you get into the real world and they're just like, it's a slugfest. They're just like throwing punches and throwing each other into walls. It's like there's, you know, there's none of that balletic grace, because at the end of the day, that's just not really how fighting works. You know, it's like when your body takes a punch in the Matrix, they can kind of just like bounce back from it. But when your body takes a punch in the real world, you're like, oh, I have a broken rib now. Well, that means I'm going to like move differently and this and that. And it's like, so it was that scene was so crazy, because I was like, wow, these characters have been fighting in virtual reality their whole lives, and now they're actually having to fight each other in real life. And getting to see what that looked like was just, it made it such like a guttural, visceral scene. I was like, ooh, wow, this is what real fighting is. And it's like, it's painful. It hurts, you know. Yeah, it's a tough scene. Like he's when he's holding the knife up to Trinity's throat, like he's like cutting her a little bit, so she's already bleeding, and it like adds like an extra level of like, oh God, like, oh, get in there and fix it, like just it's yeah, I love how across all these movies, but specifically in this one, how well they distinguish the real world from the world of the Matrix, just in terms of how people move, how they fight, how they interact with each other, how they bleed. Like it's all in the Matrix. It's also heightened and stylistic, but whenever you're in the real world, it's real. It hurts. It's bloody and gruesome and painful. Yeah.
What is that moment where he's holding like the hatch door open and she's like kicking him in the face, and it's just like all this blood and like bruising. Yeah, it's really intense. I also love the sort of twist, reveal, whatever you want to call it, later on, where Neo says to Smith about things. You were right all along. It was inevitable. And that's sort of set up here as a callback to, it's really returns here as a reference to the end of the first movie, with the sound of inevitability and all of that stuff in the subway scene. But I love that they kind of refresh it here so they can pay it off at the end of this movie. And I think that that's a really cool way that, the movie sort of ultimately reveals, Smith was right. It was inevitable. Neo had to submit to him in order to win. And I think that's such a clever way of reframing that word, and that the fact that submission isn't always defeat. I think that's an interesting, and that's also something that goes to The Last Jedi, actually, with Luke Skywalker's sort of sacrifice at the end there, which I think a lot of people completely misread. But that's another conversation. From this point, we're pretty much, go ahead, respond.
It was just so funny with the whole, speaking of the Star Wars sequels, you're saying like there's that whole blind Messiah trope, where it's like he goes blind, and like that's a thing in epic stories. And I think back in the original script that Colin Trevorrow wrote for the ninth Star Wars movie, Rey goes blind in the last act of the movie, and she has to see with the Force. Right. And it just that'd fit in really well with the whole thing. But it's like I don't think that third movie ended up having any real interest in mythic significance.
No, not really.
Anyway, yeah.
So then we pretty much shift in hardcore into the revolution part of the title. We get Mifune's speech, and I feel like this is all fun to watch, but it lacks sort of the freshness and the visionary ness. That's not a word, but the vision of the first movie. And you get this character Chara, who feels kind of Vasquez light, Vasquez of Aliens. Niobe's run.
I got a lot of big Aliens vibes here.
Yeah. It's cool. I feel like it goes on slightly too long for my taste, and it's a lot of the characters we've met, but then also a lot of either characters that aren't particularly well developed and or use stereotypes as sort of shorthand. So it's cool, I think, visually, but it's from a character perspective, it's like none of the characters that we love are really engaged. Like Mifune has a scene in Reloaded and then shows up here and gives a speech, and we're like, oh, okay, that guy from the last, all right, you know what I mean? So I feel like that's the big problem here, is that none of our characters are there at this point. So we're spending 20 minutes or whatever this whole ordeal is with the kid taking on Mifune's mission and Z kind of helping to get the gate open. And there's tension there with them getting the gate open in time for Niobe and Morpheus to show up with the EMP. And I'm realizing as I'm saying that how complex all of this is, which again, narratively works, but it's like the battle, I feel like the stakes are lacking because, like I said, none of the characters we love are really part of it.
It is. I think that's a bit of a problem in that way, but I looked at the battle more as its own sort of independent individual sequence. And I think in that regard, I think it's incredibly well pulled off. Yes, are the mech suits a little too familiar? I think they could have. I think they could have done something a little bit more inventive with those, but once the machines show up, like once they blow that hole in the top of the wall and like all of the mech suits at once start like firing and concentrating all their fire at the specific point, it's just some of the most like breathtaking images in a sci-fi action movie I've seen. Like I love how when the machines move in, they move in like these like tentacles that like weave in and out of the space in this like crazy way. It's that battle has got so much complexity, and there are so many different POVs that you're following, and the way that I think it's like, even though it's like you don't quite care about the kid quite as much as you care about like, anybody else in the movie. It's like you like when he like puts on the mech suit and has to like walk over to like the gate to open it up. I was like freaking out. I was like, dude, one sentinel could hit that guy and he would be over the edge in a second. So it's like, I think taken on its own terms as its own like little individual sequence, I think it's just astonishing. I thought it was really beautifully done. And I kind of like the freeway sequence. I think it all crashes into itself really, really well. It's like I didn't even realize until about halfway through the sequence that I hadn't even seen Neo in like a half hour. Like
he does drop out for a while.
He and it kind of, that's why I like it. This movie kind of reminded me of Lord of the Rings in that way, because it's like there will be like an entire hour of movie where you don't even see what's going on with Frodo and like Two Towers, but it doesn't matter because the battles are so intense and so well executed that you're just like laser focused in on the action. And then you get to the end of it and you're like, oh wow, oh my God, that was just one battle. We still haven't even won yet. I was really impressed by it, and impressed too, because the series had, like I said, it had not really done anything like that up until that point. Like all the action had been really concentrated to just like fun, crazy stuff in the Matrix. But it was like, it really showed that like, I think that sequence really showed that you could still have really astonishing action in the real world. It's just going to operate differently. It's like the people aren't going to be fighting with their cool, awesome kung fu moves. They have to fight like these giant squid machines with like these giant mech suits. But it was, as far as fighting giant squid machines with giant mech suit goes, I think this sequence was probably the best.
Yeah, I do. Like I said, I do like the way it all came together with the gate opening and the kind of intensity in that moment of trying to get it open before the ships like crashes into it and kind of I guess kind of dooms them all. I do love that. But then we do eventually get back over to Trinity and Neo, and we actually see them fly over the fields from the first movie where the human beings are grown, where all the pods are, which I thought was really cool. And I kind of forgot that their journey took them right past that part of it, because it's been a while since I've watched these. So when they flew into it, I immediately recognized, it's like, oh shit, that's right, they're going through the fields.
Me too. Yeah.
It's a really cool detail that I'm glad they threw in there to give us again that sense of geography of the machine city and where the fields fit in with the source and how they end up getting there by going over the clouds and seeing the kind of the beautiful clear sky above. What is what do you think is the significance of that moment? Just like hope beyond the darkness, or what is that moment to you?
Yeah,
represent?
well, it's the last thing that Trinity sees, honestly. If you think about it, because like immediately after that, the ship crashes and she dies. But I love that you get her reaction to it. That she gets to, before she dies, she gets to see the sky and just have this like moment of peace where it's like, wow, this is the world, this is Earth, and it's still just as beautiful as it was before. Just shrouded under clouds and machines and shit. That moment is particularly meaningful to me because it's kind of like a send off for that character. She fights so hard because she believes so much in the light, in the hope, that it's like, it's great that she got to see that, honestly.
Yeah, she gets the briefest confirmation that that is possible, that there's still, a sense of salvation for the human race and beyond, like you're saying, beyond all of this stuff, and the battle with the machines, that there is something perhaps more on the other side. And I guess it is sort of her glimpse into, I guess, into the afterlife too. She gets a little bit of that moment before, she does have kind of an extensive death speech, at least, where she gets to she gets to express her true sentiment to Neo. She has a whole thing where she says, last time when I died, I said, I'm sorry. And then I was like, oh, that's my last thought to Neo. I'm sorry. So I love that the movie is self-aware enough to be like, hey, remember the first one we killed Neo, then we killed Trinity. Now we're going to kill Trinity, but she's going to acknowledge, hey, last time I died, I didn't get to do it right. So thank you for giving me the second chance.
Yeah, it's I remember again, like talking about like when I saw this movie for the first time, I was like, they killed Trinity. Oh wow, but it's like watching it this time, I was like, wow, it is such a beautiful send off for that character, and so nice that she gets to have this closure with Neo, that she didn't necessarily the last time she died, so to speak, and that she gets to sort of do it on her own terms. I thought that was really nice. And again, it's just speaking to Carrie-Anne Moss as a performer, it's just a really, really beautifully acted scene.
Yeah, I think so too. And then Neo speaks to Deus Ex Machina, which is the giant machine baby face, whatever that thing is.
Do they ever refer to it as that in the movie, or is that just what they call it after the fact?
That's what they call it in after the. I mean, I also earlier in with Reloaded, I referred to that the Smith battle as the Burly Brawl, which I think is what they called it during production. That's what the track on the soundtrack is called. The one at the end is technically, I think, on set was like the Super Burly Brawl. The one that we're about to get to with all the Smiths. So they're just it's just like behind the scenes, like shorthand for the different sequences. But yes, so he kind of, strikes a deal with the machines. Program Smith has grown beyond your control, which I love. You gotta love when the hero and the villain team up against an even worse villain. That's a classic, storytelling device. And I love the fact that Smith has evolved to that point. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, exactly. Well, no, it was one of the things that I feel like I really appreciated on this rewatch was that it was like at the end of the day, the machines were going to be like the machines had their own version of a pandemic, and that was Smith. It was a disease that was literally going to wipe out their entire source of power. And it was like, if you asked me in the first one, if you asked me if what I thought the final confrontation between Neo and the machines was going to be after the first movie, I would not have guessed anything like that. And yet it feels so right, because it's like the only way that he's able to defeat them is literally by bargaining with them. He's like, look, you have a problem and I am the solution to your problem. It's really interesting, because it's like it makes me even more curious to see what the fourth one is going to be like, because now I think Neo isn't just the savior of humanity, he's the savior of the machines. He's literally the one who came in and saved them from a virus that was going to absolutely wipe them out. Right. And like I love that moment after he dies. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but that moment after he dies where the machines just like gracefully, like Jesus, like put him on a thing and move him away. Like it feels so reverent. So I'm very curious to see what the machine's relationship with Neo is going to be like going forward in the series, since it's like in sort of confronting Smith, he completely changed the paradigm of how they behave towards humanity, and it's monumental, and it's I think it's even more powerful and interesting than just like, oh, the humans beat the machines and destroyed all the machines. It's like it's so much more complex and nuanced than that. There's economics involved. There's like there's a virus involved. It's like it's there are stakes for people on both sides. It's, you know, it's part of what makes this such a cool conclusion. It isn't banal and simple in the way that I feel like a lot of third chapters end up being. It's like no, we're gonna keep asking questions about the world and keep asking questions about the characters and keep making it even more interesting and complex.
Yeah, no, totally. And not only is that how the conflict with Neo and the machines ends, the way the conflict, like we sort of has already touched on, the way the conflict with Neo and Smith ends, Neo doesn't like punch Smith really hard. I mean, we have the slow motion punches across the face, which are again really, really fun. But then he gives in to Smith, which is thematically satisfying, but you know, not what you expect. And also, just as a side note, there's actually been 3 video games based on The Matrix. There was The Matrix Online, which had a continuing story, and there's a whole thing in there, which I didn't play that, but it was live from 2004 to 2009, where Morpheus,
like a World of Warcraft type game, right?
Yeah, exactly. Morpheus is supposedly dead, but it's unclear. His body and Neo's body have never been really found, so it's unclear what the hell's going on with that, or even if that's going to be canon with the 4th one. But there is a alternate ending to the Revolutions after the Super Broly Brawl in this other game called The Matrix Path of Neo, where you get to that point. Ooh. And I think there's like this, there's like these very like rough animated little figures, and I think it's supposed to be the Wachowskis, and they're saying, yeah, you know, we this is how it goes in the movie, but that's not very satisfying for a video game. So here's something else that we've come up with, and so Smith like becomes, I think he takes pieces. I think there's pieces of the buildings and vehicles, and he becomes like a big mecha Smith, and this is what you fight in the final level. It's on YouTube if you care to get a glimpse of any of this.
Oh my gosh.
There's a big mecha Smith that you fight at the end of the Matrix Path of Neo, because they're just trying to go for the most epic boss possible for the very last level of this video game, rather than you just being like, your final mission is let Smith take, absorb you. I think that it's just a really fun way to completely flip it. And then I think at the very end, you see the sunset or the sunrise, and it's like We Are the Champions is playing. It's really weird, but definitely worth checking out.
Oh my God. That's I well, here's the thing. I would have loved to see all of the Smiths like form together into one giant like mecha Smith. But I would not have wanted that to sacrifice the actual ending to that battle, which I think is like really cool and really beautiful. But that would have been cool to see. Maybe they I bet they wanted to do that, and then they just didn't have the money to. They were like Warner Brothers, giant mech Smith, and they were like, you can have everything, but you can't have everything. But I love that. I love that battle sequence though, between him and Agent Smith, where it's like raining. It's just it's so cool. Like when they're like falling down between the buildings, and you see like all of the Smiths like looking in from the windows. It's just like like this movie has just some of my favorite images in a movie that I've seen. It's just breathtaking. You know, when they like hit each other and like all the rain just like goes away, and it's like this giant bubble of air. It's so cool.
There's also elements of like, I got a little bit of Revenge of the Sith kind of element too, when they punch each other and they both go flying back sort of simultaneously. Like how about the point of the battle is how evenly matched they really are. So like I said with Man of Steel. And
exactly.
It's just these two are equally powerful. They were going to fight. And yes, certain points Smith is winning, certain points Neo is winning. But ultimately this battle's not going to end until somebody kind of brings the stalemate to a close and chooses to do that. The fact that Smith can fly now, it's a very anime-inspired sequence. And I say this as someone who hasn't even watched that much anime, but I know you could just feel it in the air that it's anime inspired, and it's hard for me to imagine the Wachowskis coming up with and like Warner Brothers saying no to them, because I feel like it feels like they were able to do so much with this scene. I feel like it's the kind of sequence that some people might be like, okay, this is overkill, but I think they can go fuck off. I think this is so much like it's the whole point is it has to be epic. And the fact that it's darker, that it's set in night, means that any of those little like CG imperfections that were so noticeable in the previous movie, you can gloss right over it because it's easier to hide those scenes.
Yeah, exactly. I just like people who think that scene is over the top. I'm just like, did you watch any of the other Matrix movies? Like, did you? Oh my gosh, it is really. I think it is such a powerful. I think it's such a powerful final fight scene of this series, because it's like at the end of the day, that's what it's been about, is this tug of war between the force of hope and good and choice and the machine, like, and I think Smith is sort of the perfect embodiment of that. It's just like this thing, this intelligence that just has gotten so powerful that it's just consuming everything, and it's like it is one of the most epic fight scenes in a movie I have seen, and it continues to blow me away.
Of course, we get the "Why, Mr. Anderson," which again, kind of like the speech preceding the Burly Brawl thing, the purpose that binds us. Now we get the whole "Why, Mr. Anderson? Why do you persist?" And he gets like a Southern accent there, which I was like, "Where did that come from?" It's like, "Wow, Mr. Anderson, why do you persist?" I'm like, "Where did that come from?" But sure. That whole thing about how is it for peace, maybe it's for love, and like there was a point where I had a lot of that memorized. Illusions, Mr. Anderson, vagaries of perception, temporary constructs of a feeble human intellect trying desperately to justify an existence that is without meaning or purpose. This is from my memory right now. I'm not reading anything, because I've seen this so much, and that monologue makes
great job.
Thank you. I just love the way he delivers it, and the way that it's good shit. It's such a great moment.
And I love Neo's response to it. I love that response to it when he's just like, I choose to, I because I can, because I have that ability, because it is within my power to decide my own destiny. And it's like, it's his superpower. It's like, it's not his superpower isn't that he's, can fly or, blow up buildings or this or that. It's like his superpower is that he understands that at the end of the day, you make your own decisions and you make your own fate. And it's like, that's something that Smith just doesn't seem to have any concept of. He's like, what keeps driving you? I'm so confused.
Yeah. He's so frustrated. It's great. It's amazing how he goes on for like, I don't know, a minute and change, just like asking him, is it this? Multiple choice, motherfucker, give me an answer. And then Neil's like, no, none of those.
I think,
so close.
This movie is so like deliciously cheesy in that it's just not afraid to lean into these like huge over the top moments that are just like you don't even really notice that Smith is monologuing in that moment, just because you're just so wrapped up in it, in all of it. It's great.
So then Neo realizes that it's inevitable, lets himself get taken over by Smith. Of course, it's the Oracle Smith, which is why he's the one that's fighting. Because the rest of them just going to enjoy the show, that whole thing. And then the deletion, I guess, message starts getting sent out, and Smith starts to glitch. I think when I first saw this, it took me a couple watches to really be like, wait, what's happening? I don't know if I was just really dense or what was going on, but there's so much happening, and this world is so complex that I think you don't really put together, oh, that's why Neo had to do that, because he's connected to the source, and that's how you had to get Smith touching the source so that the source could just delete Smith like whole cloth from the Matrix.
It doesn't explain it to, like, it's interesting. Right. In a series that's all about like explaining things to you, it's really interesting how that last beat, that final death scene, is just completely communicated through visuals. I don't know if it entirely worked quite as well as it should have, since I think I speak for both of us when I say that it didn't it was a little confusing on first watch, but I don't know, the emotion of it felt right. It was like there was something that rung really true about like what I was seeing on screen, even if it was like I didn't quite understand until later what exactly happened, you know.
But upon rewatch, I think it's the kind of conclusion that I think gets stronger and stronger the more you watch it, and the more you're like, oh, of course, this is the way. It was inevitable. It's the only way this could end. I mean, it's a beautiful way to wrap up that story, and for all the action and all the fighting that Neo does, his real act of heroism was giving up, kind of like giving in to what his, what he was capable of achieving in that moment. And then you get that real cathartic, the kid kind of running around. He even does like a little hop at one point that always cracked me up. It's like, the war is over. And he kind of hops up and runs around. I was like, Jesus, what a doofus. But the war is over. The war is over. And you get that really like kind of powerful moment when everybody's reacting, again, Link kind of leading the charge in the emotional response to something big happening. And you get the Morpheus and Niobe, thank you, Neo thing. I really like that. Again, for all the stuff I've bitched about all these supporting characters, and I'm like, do we really need this many people? The way that it ends with Link and everything, I really think is pretty powerful and pretty special. And then especially being intercut with, like you're saying, Neo being sort of carried away, very much a messianic figure by the machines, I think it's so like they're so careful with his body too. They're like, this dude is our Jesus now. It's like, is he gonna be their one? And like how is that relationship gonna shift in 4? I'm very curious. But before we get to 4 and our brief thoughts on that, but go ahead. You want to say something?
Well, I was kind of that, I like this movie. It doesn't end abruptly, but it like there's no epilogue. Like there's no oh, and then this happened, and then there's no Frodo going back to the Shire or celebrating with the Ewoks or stuff. Like it ends and then you're out of it, which I don't know if you need anything else. And I mean, there is that scene between the Oracle and the Architect in the Matrix with the beautiful sky, which I feel like too is like, I feel like that sky is very intentionally evocative of the sky, the actual sky that Trinity sees right before she dies when they go right above the clouds. It's yet another kind of like cool callback within itself. But it's like, it was interesting. Like I left the movie being like, oh, well, what happens to humanity now? Like what happens to humanity in the machines? And the movie doesn't concretely answer that. And it's a little frustrating, but I think it's at the same time, it's like, it's cool because it allows it to exist more in your imagination after the fact. You're like, well, what does happen now? Well, it's like anything, honestly. Like the paradigm of the world has shifted once again. Now people can choose to leave the Matrix if they want. Like there's it's a somber but weirdly hopeful ending, which is why I love that thing that the Oracle says to the Architect when he's like, did you know that this was going to happen? And she's like, I didn't know it was going to happen. I believed it was going to happen. It's a great button to the movie, but it's not what I expected necessarily.
For sure. Yeah, we get the little first one. I love the Matrix Reloads, and you get sort of the black cat kind of glitch, which is a reference to the first movie. That it's a glitch in the Matrix. The black cat walks past and then kind of reloads, and another black cat walks right past. Sati now has the purpose that I guess presumably she's the one that does the sunrise and sunset within the Matrix. That's kind of her purpose as a program. Then now she has a place in this new world. And yeah, so we were sort of saying earlier, the Architect and Oracle kind of like almost like betting humanity's fate and kind of playing this. He even says it's a very dangerous game you've been playing or something like that. And it does. It ends with it ends not with a period or an exclamation point. It ends with an ellipsis. And I think it's he asked, how do you think this piece will last? She's like, as long as it can. And I'm thinking to myself, well, about 18 years our time, I guess, because we're getting another one next year. So I mean, we'll find out exactly. So they even leave it open for Sati says, are we going to see Neo again? And she says, I suspect so someday. So I guess that's a good segue into what the fuck is going to happen in Matrix 4. What do you want to see happen? I mean, thoughts.
Okay,
It's
what do
coming
I wanna
out a
see?
year
That's a
from
good
when this
question.
episode's being released. So I obviously we can't. We're not going to try and guess what Lana Wachowski has what she's coming up with. But what would we? I
Sure.
guess kind of stuff we want to see.
In the broadest sense, what I want to see is I want to see how the world has changed. I think I want what I want most out of that movie is I want a sense of like as the Merovingian says, cause and effect. I want to see, okay, so that's what happened at the end of that story. That's how things changed. What does that look like? Like, what did that change about the way that the machines interact with humans? Like, is there like a tenuous piece now? Have things gotten better? Like, are they like what, or have things gotten worse? Like, I my worry is that it'll do kind of what Force Awakens did in the sense where it's like, oh, well, people liked when these were the stakes. Let's just make those the stakes again. Let's Empire, Rebels, so on and so forth. I'm my worry is that it's just going to be like, it's going to kind of requel Matrix. It's just going to be like, the humans are still at war with the machines, and you still have to do this and still have to do this. Like I'm hoping that because it's Lana Wachowski, who's a genius and really smart, that they find a way to move the story forward based on what happened at the end of the last movie in a unique and interesting way. I think that's my biggest want. In terms of like characters and stuff, I mean, I would love to, if Carrie-Anne Moss is coming back, I would love to see more layers explored within Trinity and Neo's relationship. I want to see more cool Niobe stuff. But I also I think I was
going to say the big thing is
I think above all else.
Sorry, go ahead. We have a little bit of a delay there, but go ahead. I'll wait till you're done.
Oh, good. All good. I think I want to I want to see new action. I want to see cool, new, innovative action. I want to, like all the other Matrix movies, I want to see something that I've never seen before. Show me something show me an action scene that is completely new and completely innovative and completely unlike anything I've ever seen. That's probably, so those are my biggest wants going into the fourth movie, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to see them try and retcon anything out of this. I know that obviously the sequel, the 2 and 3 were less well received than the first one. So I would hope that they would still acknowledge all of this in its totality. And like you said, the repercussions of Neo's actions at the end of the third film. I'm really curious, the fact that we had 3 main leads throughout this trilogy, only one of which in the movies, survives all 3 movies and is the one that's not coming back. So Keanu Reeves, I think it's pretty clear how Neo can come back. How do you think Trinity? Because sure. I mean, these can do anything literally in these films. That's kind of the fun of them.
Yeah,
I think Trinity could even be a simulation in the Matrix, not like how, because she's dead in the real world. So how would you like to see them sort of reimagine that character or revive her in some way?
I think what you said is best. I think a recreation of her in the Matrix is a really good way to go. It's less what I want to see and more like what I don't want to see. Like what I don't want to see is I don't want like the machines actually saved her and she was actually alive. Like, that always feels like a bit of a that always feels like I don't know. I'm kind of having a similar thing with Stranger Things right now. Like I'm like, they're bringing Hopper back for season 4. Right. And I'm like, but how are you bringing him back? Cause I'm like, that's important. Like, are you gonna actually make it like interesting and different, or are you just gonna like cop out and say, oh, well, that death scene that didn't mean anything, that didn't really happen. So yeah, it's like I said, it's more of what I don't want rather than what I want. But more than anything, I just want more Carrie-Anne Moss because I think she's amazing. Right. So.
Yeah, no, I do too. I think that there's rumors that Yahya Abdul Mateen II, who was in Watchmen on HBO and in the new Candyman, whenever that is supposed to come out now, that there's rumors that his character might be a younger Morpheus or something. But I feel like that's always just the internet being like, well, we had a black character and there's a black guy in this movie, so it must be the same guy. Kind of like
What
with
if they
Star
were in
Wars,
the
where everybody
Matrix
was like,
the
Finn
whole
must be
time?
Lando's son. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I it's not nearly as complex a franchise, but it's sort of like what Fast and Furious is doing now with Han, where it's like, he's alive. How? He jumped out of the car. He has a twin. I don't know. Who cares? Yeah, I don't want them to
That's
kind of
Fast and
minimize.
Furious. Who does care?
Well, exactly. Well, in that franchise, yeah, who does care? But this series has always been about the details, and so yeah, exactly. So yeah, are there any?
They can do whatever the hell they want.
Exactly. Are there anything about Matrix Reloaded or Matrix Revolutions we haven't talked about? And I had a feeling this was going to be a unprecedentedly long podcast when I suggested it, which is why I was, oh God, I know. Well, I mean, there's lots to talk about here.
Yeah. All I will say is this. If you are listening to this podcast and you're the kind of person who saw these movies when they came out and were disappointed by what they were, I would strongly recommend not only revisiting this with fresh eyes, but revisiting the whole trilogy back to back with fresh eyes. Because I think it's like, I think if these movies would have come out nowadays, I think they would have been a lot better received by both critics and audiences. I think just like audiences have gotten smarter. I think critics too have gotten smarter. And I think at the end of the day, I do think these are great movies. I stand by what I say. I think this trilogy matches pace with Star Wars. I think it matches pace with Lord of the Rings. I think it is true filmmaking excellence. And if it disappointed you, then I give it another chance, because you might be surprised.
Yeah, and I wanted to add too that all three of these are on HBO Max, as is the Animatrix. And if, like us, you're interested in seeing Wonder Woman, huh? What was that?
I just said, which I will watch. I'm going to watch it.
Right, exactly. And if, like us, you're interested in seeing Wonder Woman 1984 not in a movie theater, you probably already have HBO Max or will be getting it very soon. So might as well watch the Matrix movies while you're on there. Jackson Smith, can you tell people where they can find you on social media?
So my Twitter is... It's Jackson C. Smith, so it's a little C in the middle. And then if you just type in Real Screen Fever, that's Adam and I's Twitter account for our YouTube page. Hopefully we're going to be posting more stuff on there in the coming months. And yes, I am. And then if you search Real Screen Fever on YouTube, that's or just Screen Fever on YouTube, that's where all of my video essays and podcasts are. I am so fried. I haven't talked this long about a movie with anyone for a long time, so if I'm a little jumbled, that's why. But yes, no, Jackson C. Smith 95 on Twitter, and then Screen Fever on YouTube. Yes, and that's where you can find everything.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. I know this went way longer than I think either of us kind of expected, but we wanted to.
This was great. This was awesome.
Epic treatment. So this is, I think, by far
they're epic movies.
Episode. Yeah, exactly. All right, Jackson, I think that's pretty much all we've got. Thanks so much for coming on. We'll get you on again soon at some point. And awesome. Looking forward to Matrix 4 in 1 year.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on, Robert. It was a pleasure as always.
So there you have it. That was the end of our conversation on The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. Big thanks to Jackson for coming on and doing that epic 2-part episode on those movies. And that'll be it for the Crooked Table podcast for 2020 as well. Thanks everybody for listening this year, and we have a lot of exciting things planned for 2021. Probably going to skip the first few weeks of the year just to kind of recalibrate and get things ready and relaunch, start the new year off in a stronger than usual fashion. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, this has been the Crooked Table podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED